What's up, class? My name is Jacob Knopf. I'm going to give this presentation on The Narrow Road to the Deep North by Basho. Um, I'm going to talk about what my expectations were for this book and how this book met, didn't meet, or exceeded my expectations. I'm going to talk about just why I love this book and why I think it's still listened to and read to today. Why, even though it came out hundreds of years ago, why is it so famous? So yeah, let's get into it. So, first of all, who is Basho? Basho, the author, is one of the most famous poets of all time. He was born in 1644 in Yeonu, Japan, and died in November of 1694. During his life, he became famous for his work on haikus, which is a form of poetry which is made up of 17 syllables over 3 lines, arranged 5 syllables, then 7, then 5 again. And really, that's all the information I knew about him. Except that, and a little note that Professor Cole said in one of his videos about this play, or book, excuse me, where he compared Basho to Shakespeare. And that comment, just for some reason, just set my expectations for what I thought was going to happen in this book. I was expecting a great story with great characters like Shakespeare. I was expecting drama, character arcs, betrayal, and other stereotypes that come with famous older literature. I was expecting great haikus, like where I'd have to clap like a third grader to really test if they're actually 5 or 7 syllables long. So those were my expectations when I went into this book. They were very specific. I had very great expectations, and I thought I knew what I was gonna read before I even read it. And let's just say pretty much every expectation I had was wrong. After only the first 8 pages or so, I realized this isn't like Shakespeare because it's a great story with lots of drama. It's like Shakespeare in a way because it's a trendsetter. It paved a path for others to follow and study and read for hundreds of years after he died. I realized that the syllables, they don't translate very well from Japanese to English, so almost none of the poems I read were 3 lines, and they weren't in the right syllable formations to be considered a haiku in English. So I had to scrap all of my expectations and read with an open mind and try to figure out, why was this work so great? Why is it still read today? So what I figured out is this story, it isn't like most stories. This story doesn't have character development, drama, or a big climax that makes the whole story worth reading in the end. This book doesn't have an antagonist or protagonist in the normal ways. Overall, it doesn't follow the blueprint for a great story. So what makes this story great? Why is it still famous hundreds of years later? Well, the answer is a cliche that we talk about all the time in real life, but for some reason not a lot in stories. And that cliche is, it's not about the end, it's about the journey. In this book, that cliche is brought to life because as a whole, this story really isn't that interesting, at least not to me. If you gave me a quick recap of the plot and said it's about this guy who at the beginning leaves his family and friends to take this long journey from South Japan to North Japan, and on his way he will see some temples and some beautiful trees and mountains and meet some cool people, meet some old friends. Really, all those things by themselves, they really just don't sound that interesting, at least not to me. It's really not something that I want to read about. But when I did read it, when I read all those small details, like staying in a crappy inn on page 120, seeing a beautiful tree on 138, bathing in the hot springs, or seeing a shrine, or whatever it is, those small things, they just mattered. They were just interesting to me. Hearing Basho's normal experiences and then feeling how he feels through his poetry, it just worked for some reason. For some reason, I was just entertained in things that I don't find entertaining. Like, seriously, I can't express this enough. All these things are not things I want to read about. But for some reason, when I did read about them, I cared about them. I cared about the young girl that he met on page 102 and then wrote poetry based on her name, which her name I think was Kazane, or I'm probably butchering the pronunciation to that, but for some reason I just cared. And that's why I love this book, because I realized that Basho, he has the ability to make me care about things that I don't care about. Like, I don't care about that young girl's name. I don't care about shrines for gods that I don't believe in. I don't care about the 30th beautiful tree or the 8th mountain that he's seen on his journey. All of those things I don't care about. But for some reason, when I was reading this book, time flew by. I cared about the things I don't care about. I was interested in small things that really don't have a purpose for a greater story. And that's what I think the beautiful part of this book is. It's my big insight as to why I think you should read this book. Or if you have already read it, what I want you to take away is the big picture. And that big picture idea, that big insight idea, is that the big picture, it doesn't matter. What matters is the small details, the feeling of everyday things like nature and friendship. You know, normally we only talk about the big picture things in life. We only talk about the head news stories, the season finales of TV shows or big movies or just stuff, the big ideas, the Luke, I am your father, things like that, the things that are famous. But that's what's so cool about Basho's journey. He made things that don't matter matter. So if you decide to read this book for the first time or reread it again, I suggest that you don't try to find the bigger story or predict the twist like you do when you read other books, but try to appreciate the small details. Appreciate the things that don't matter. Because this for me, these things they didn't matter, but for some reason they are interesting. I care about, you know, that crappy inn or that shrine. And that's why I like this book in general. I know I'm kind of going on, but I feel like I haven't said enough for this book because it's such a great book and I really enjoyed it. And I really hope that you who's listening to this, that you enjoyed it, that you found things that you didn't find interesting. And if you haven't read it, I suggest that you do read this book. It's a really quick read. It flies by, and you're going to find yourself caring about things that you normally don't care about because Basho is just such a great storyteller, or maybe I was just in the right mood when I read it, but for some reason this this book has lived on for hundreds of years, and I think we need to figure out why. So yeah, I just encourage you to reread this book or read it for the first time, and let me know what you think about it. Thank you for listening to this presentation. Have a great rest of your day. Goodbye.